On the Track is a monthly webTV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
I'm getting really worried, you know, with Charlotte not going to be here for so long while she's doing her GCSEs. John's going to get a bit weird on us, isn't he? We're going to have to think of something, you know.
What have you got in mind?
We're just going to have to take matters into our own hands.
And I'm supposed to be revising, but you know I can't leave them to their own devices.
Well, I'm actually quite disappointed that the girls have such a low opinion of me. What do they think I'm going to be doing? Do you think that I'm going to introduce the show with, a cartoon biscuit jumping up and down to the sound of Purcell's trumpet voluntary? Or do you think I'm going to have a ballet of root vegetables? Really, all of this is just complete nonsense. I'm a fairly respectable citizen scientist and a well-known cryptozoologist. Yes, I have a reputation to uphold. My name is John Downs, and welcome to another episode of On the Track.
I'm not going to be on the track for a while because I'm going to be studying for my exams. Please keep your fingers crossed for me, and I'll see you at the end of June.
My late father always said that it was vulgar to talk about money and that the Downs family were never vulgar. Well, if you just felt that tremor then, that was my father rolling in his grave. Because, unfortunately, although I find it rather embarrassing, I need to talk about money. A year or so ago, we set up a Patreon campaign to raise money for On the Track and for other work that the CFZ does around the world. If you fancy supporting us for as little as £1 a month, please get in touch. You can find out more details of the Patreon campaign at this address. Now, I've had enough of being vulgar. Back to the show. Here we are in Wolseley on a beautiful late spring day. The garden is all quiet, and the animals and the birds are living in harmony with nature. The orange cat is being the orange cat, and Karina is trying to film a very small dandelion clock because of its fragile beauty. But what are the rest of the CFZ family doing on this beautiful day? Are we outside enjoying the joys of nature, or are we in a badly converted potato shed trying desperately to do some video about the Yeti? Well, I think this is what they call a very stripped down segment of the show, because not only do we not have Charlotte, and she won't be back until the end of June, but we haven't got Graham because he's away for the weekend visiting his mother. And now the full moon's come and gone, I'm really in a mood to be creative. So, I want to introduce you to my new camera person. Now, camera person, can you wave with one hand, say hello?
Hello.
Come on, sound a bit more enthusiastic.
Hello. Chums.
And here we have, did you say chums?
Yes.
That's very nice. And here we have Archie. And over here we have Mother. Mother waves the camera. And here we have the ideal nuclear or possibly post-nuclear family. Enjoy. Well, this is, despite the fact I'm here with my nearest and dearest, who I love very much, and I'm still missing Charlotte, because this is the part of the show when Charlotte and I usually sit down and have a jolly 15 minutes taking the mickey out of the worst set of videos and pictures to have turned up in the cryptozoological universe during the previous month. But Charlotte's off being diligent at her studies, and so I'm going to have to do it myself. First of all, let's talk about the Yeti. Well, I don't usually agree with the British newspapers, especially the right-wing ones, but on this occasion I think the Daily Telegraph was spot on. Indian Army ridiculed after it announces Yeti discovery in Nepal. First thing I heard about it was when I was given a phone call by the BBC World Service asking me to comment on allegations that the Indian Army had found the Yeti. Well, obviously they hadn't found the Yeti. What they did do was photograph a series of tracks which they believe were from the Yeti. Well, as I said to the jolly nice chaps from BBC World Service when I spoke to them, well, no, I'm afraid I don't think that this is conclusive proof of anything. Yes, I do believe that there is a very real possibility that there may well be a species of unknown higher primate living in what used to be Soviet Central Asia and in various parts of the Himalayas and even in Western China, but I truly don't think these new photographs prove anything at all. These pictures are worse than useless, and if that one there, for example, is allegedly the footprint of a Yeti, why has it got the tracks which appear very much as if they are from the soles of a pair of Wellington boots?
Absolutely appalling, isn't it?
A Nepalese military spokesman went to the spot where the footprints had been photographed, but by the time he arrived, unfortunately the footprints had vanished. The Nepalese government has stated that, in their opinion, the footprints are not anything to do with the Yeti, but are actually of a mother bear with her cub. This is partially because they don't believe in the Yeti, partially because the footprints are 32 inches long, and the only thing big enough to have made 32-inch footprints would have been a dinosaur, and the idea of a dinosaur surviving in the Himalayas is even more unlikely than the idea of a gorilla-sized, upright walking great ape.
Stop. Bears can't have a 32-inch footprint.
Of course they don't. But if you have a baby bear doing a good King Wenceslas...
Do what?
You know, in his mater's steps he trod.
Good, you're pretentious sometimes.
Well, then he can, and by the way, I want to apologise. I couldn't find a piece of public domain video showing a single cub following a mother bear, so you'll just have to put up with this bevy of cubs following a mother bear who's being very maternal. And, not unsurprisingly, the idea of these footprints having been made by a bear or a family of bears prompted people to start asking questions based upon the hypothesis that Brian Sykes put forward a few years ago, that at least some of the evidence that had been collected over the years to support the existence of the Yeti actually proved the existence of an unknown species or subspecies of bear. Why people seem to think that the existence of a new species of bear in the Himalayas, which is something that Heuvelmans postulated well over half a century ago, is somehow mutually exclusive with the idea of there being a new species of higher primate, I don't know. But whenever anybody mentions the possibility of there being a bear in the Himalayas, people immediately say, so the Yeti is nonsense, is it? Well, the only thing that's nonsense is these photographs. They don't actually prove anything. But it's not just photographs of the Yeti which we're going to look at in this episode. Well, there was a big hoo-ha about what I believe is called in the current patois cultural misappropriation this month. when various people north of the border in Scotland complained vociferously that a German supermarket, Aldi, was selling what should be a purely Scottish delicacy, square sausages. Well, if they're that pissed off about sausages, why is the Scotsman newspaper not making far more of a fuss about this story? Teenager reckons he has the clearest proof that the Loch Ness Monster exists. Well, this photograph, which we'll look at in a moment, was taken in Canada, so it can't be anything to do with the Loch Ness Monster. But, nitpicking aside, let's have a look at the evidence. Matthew D'Amico, a Floridian teenager on holiday, says that he has captured the best photographs of the Loch Ness Monster for nearly 90 years. In Banff National Park in Alberta, Canada. The river where D'Amico snapped his pictures is about 4,000 miles away from Loch Ness. D'Amico said, "I have what I believe to be the most accurate photos of the Loch Ness Monster that have been captured since the 1933 photo." The photo that D'Amico is referring to is known as the Surgeon's photo, the most famous picture of the Loch Ness Monster, which surfaced in 1933. The photograph was eventually declared to be a hoax involving a toy submarine, although the precise details of that hoax are still being debated to this day, with many people believing it shows a water bird like a diver, of which 3 species are known in Scotland. The 17-year-old was on a family holiday celebrating his sister's birthday when the creature was spotted. D'Amico said, "After an hour hiking, we took a break on a hill with a great view of Bow River, where my sister and I saw what appeared to be a prehistoric animal swimming. Amazed by the sight, the teen quickly took some photos to capture the strange sight. I immediately took photos, and after evaluating, my sister and I responded with the same conclusion," he said. "It was the Loch Ness Monster." The image shows something which could be interpreted as a long neck protruding from the water, but whether it is the cold hard evidence that Nessie Hunt has been looking for is up for debate. Personally, I think it's a branch which must have fallen off one of the denizens of the forest.
Tremendous fun, viewers, barking up the wrong tree again.
But then, in one of those strange synchronicities which are only too familiar to those of us who continually dip our toes into the waters of Fortean investigation, whilst I was looking for a piece of royalty-free footage of the Banff National Park, I found this.
Take care. Yeah, thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, so you don't need to pay.
Hello, everybody. Hi. Hey. Welcome aboard the Alberta Explorer. Sounds a little bit loud. Can everyone hear me all right? Yeah. Perfect. I've only seen a bear twice this season.
Did anyone see any features of it? Fur. Like, it wasn't a bear. I didn't really get it. That wasn't... What? A Sasquatch? Yeah, turn around for sure. That is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life.
What was that?
Did you see it?
I've seen it twice, 4 times.
That's weird.
Did you see it?
I don't really know what to say. I'm normally not ever speechless.
Did you see it? I saw it.
You can't get over here. There's no possible way to get to this shoreline. That's probably where the weird thing is. That was weird? So, I don't understand. Can we loop back one more time? That is seriously one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life. So what happened on Lake Minnewanka stays on Lake Minnewanka.
That is bizarrely reminiscent of something which happened to me back in January 2003 at Bowlam Lake in Northumberland, but that's another story which we'll revisit on another occasion.
But wait, there's more.
This photograph was apparently taken in early May in Houston on Richmond near Highway 6 behind the Shell facility, according to the person who photographed it. As regular CFZ watchers will know, I've been interested in these reports of strange dog-like creatures which have been reported from Texas and other parts of the southern United States for the last 15 years. The first specimen was shot by a man called Devon McAnally, and due to the idiocy of a production company working with the Sci-Fi Channel who thought that they'd be able to get me to say that this thing was obviously an alien construct, I got to interview him fairly early on. 6 years later, in 2010, Karina and I went back, courtesy of the kindness of our good friends Richie and Naomi West, and we continued our researches into what I call the Texas Blue Dogs. The specimens secured by Dr. Phyllis Canyon from Cuero in Texas are certainly a hybrid of coyotes and Mexican wolves. Others appear to be hybrids of coyotes and domestic dogs. But the thing that I find particularly interesting is that on many of these specimens, particularly the males, one finds peculiar cushion-like pads of flesh on their haunches, basically where their buttocks would be if dogs had buttocks, which obviously they don't. And if you look closely at this photograph, it does appear that this creature, too, has these strange pads of flesh. But there is one thing that I do want to say. How many times do I have to say that these things are not chupacabra? Chupacabra are semi-bipedal, apparently vampiric, though probably not, creatures with spikes on their backs that have been reported over the years on the Canovanas Plateau of Puerto Rico. These things are something equally interesting, but completely different. The only time I ever visited the Iranian capital, Tehran, was 50 years ago, and I went there totally by accident. I was 9 years old and my family were flying back from Hong Kong to England for their annual holiday via those jolly nice fellows at BOAC. Something untoward happened to the plane, so we had to make an emergency stop at Tehran. And so I spent my one and only night in this beautiful country. 50 years on, and I think Tehran is probably less beautiful, far more modern, and far more polluted. And, let's face it, the Iranian authorities are not people that you want to fall foul of. In fact, I think I'd do my best not to piss them off in any shape or form. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not being the slightest bit racist or Islamophobe or anything else phobe. My father was somewhat of an Islamic scholar, and I was brought up with Muslims, amongst people of other religions. And let's face it, anybody who can piss off the American president so much must have something going for them. But I'd like to state again that I really do not want to fall foul of them. So, when somebody contacted me on Twitter asking me to have a look at a piece of video, but asking me on my solemn word not to publicise who they were or their contact details, I agreed immediately. This is certainly one of the most peculiar pieces of video that I have been sent for a long time. I truly have no idea what to make of this. My first impression was that it was some large fledgling bird that had become quite tame, but later on in the video it does appear to have hands rather than claws. My informant wrote, I received this video of an abnormal animal several days ago. I searched the internet and can't find anything about it. It has a human-like face and is intelligent. The language of the video is Persian and Turkish. I asked whether there was any more information about where it came from or where it was filmed, and a day or so later my informant replied, "Yes, there is. The camera zooms on the paper that shows the day of filming. It shows about 2 years ago. The language of the participants is Iranian Turkish, therefore the film is made in the Iranian country in Azerbaijan province. The man who's related with this humanoid looks like an exorcist or somebody like this. I'm afraid I don't have any more information about people or places where the film was made." I asked about the copyright and was told, "No, I don't know, and I'm sure it is not under any copyright rules. You can put it on your webTV show. Only, don't mention me as sender. Don't attach my Twitter account and email under the video, please. I'm very encouraged to know about this video. Please send me any news that you get. Thank you." Before we go any further, I think that we should take a look at the region from whence this video apparently came. Azerbaijan is a historical region in northwestern Iran that borders Iraq, Turkey, the Nakhivan Autonomous Republic, Armenia and the Republic of Azerbaijan. Iranian Azerbaijan is administratively divided into West Azerbaijan, East Azerbaijan, Ardabil and Zanjan provinces. The region is mostly populated by Azeris, with minority populations of Kurds, Armenians, Tats, Talyers, Assyrians and Persians. Iranian Azerbaijan is a land originally and historically called Azerbaijan. The Azerbaijani populated Republic of Azerbaijan apparently appropriated the name of the neighbouring Azerbaijani populated region in Iran sometime during the 20th century. My informant suggested that the man holding the creature was an exorcist, but although I know next to nothing about Islamic exorcism, or Christian exorcism for that matter, I think that he's treating the animal with tenderness and compassion, more like a pet than a demon. No, I think that it's more likely that the man is a virgin. The inhabitants of every village attribute spiritual importance to multiple sites scattered throughout the village territory. These places, generally known as ojak, are located in areas with rapid variation on the land topography and are in some way linked to jinns via their established narratives. Most of these sites possess significantly conspicuous landmarks. At some sites, which are considered most sacred by many villagers, people will occasionally gather to slaughter sacrificial animals or offer a simple meal of freshly baked bread and cheese with tea. At some sites they have collected medium-sized rocks around some trees and hang coloured threads or ribbons from the trees. Vergi, meaning gift, is a perceived ability for performing extraordinary feats, such as prophecy or healing, which supposedly can only be received from God or from sheer imams. It is believed that a vergi is inherited and not to be learned. For instance, there is a family in Vakran amongst whom the vergi for catching snakes is transmitted from generation to generation. Sometimes a vergi is claimed to be received in dreams, but often it is received in ojaks, where ghosts show themselves to and talk to the gifted. It is believed that there is no escape from being a vergi, and that, at first, it generates suffering comparable to shamanistic illness. Could this man be a vergi? Quite possibly, but it still doesn't answer what the creature is. Graham and Karina, upon looking at the film, both think that it shows a small monkey that's been forced to wear an unfeasibly large wig. I, however, think, and remember this is only a complete guess, that it looks a little bit like a young porcupine. The Indian-crested porcupine is known to be found in both Azerbaijan and Iran, and although I don't know for certain that it is found in this region of Iran, the fact it's found in the neighbouring country would be quite a good piece of corroborative evidence that it quite possibly is. Here I should say, I think, that I can't see the human-like face that he talks about, but perhaps you guys can. I'm 60 in a few months, and my perceptive skills are nowhere near as good as they once were. But it is films like this, stuff like this, that really keeps me alive and keeps me fascinated with all the strange things that do still exist across the world in which we live. So, what do you think it is? Has anybody got any ideas? I really look forward to hearing from you. Please email me on john@eclipse.co.uk. Now, before we leave this subject entirely, I've decided that what I am going to do in the next few weeks is I'm going to put an unedited version of this footage, including all the soundtrack which I took off for this episode of On the Track, so people can actually hear it all for themselves and make up their own minds. Again, please get in touch with me if you have any idea what this creature is. Now, boys and girls, what do we have here? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I know that I'm an avowed anti-capitalist, and you're probably tired of me saying so in this show, but I do sometimes sell things. And the CFZ sometimes sells things, and there are members of the extended CFZ family who do all sorts of interesting things, which I think would be of interest to you people out there in consumer land. So, if I can coin a term from the late lamented Ivan T. Sanderson, let me tell you about some of these things. I've known Richard Muirhead longer than I've known anybody else in the world that I'm not related to. We first became friends during the summer of 1970, just after I'd come out of hospital. We both lived in Hong Kong, and my mother and his mother were friends who used to play tennis together on occasion. When I first met Richard, he was 6 and I was 11, and as I'm coming up to my 60th birthday, you can probably do the maths for yourself. Some years ago, Richard started a magazine called Flying Snake, which is a wonderfully eccentric miscellany of cryptozoological and Fortean stories interspersed with some of Richard's equally wonderfully eccentric comments under the guise of Dr. Devo. Yes, Devo, the people who wear the weird plastic hats and sang a song called Whip It. And yes, I bought Richard one of these weird plastic hats once and spent more money on buying that hat for him than I spent on anything else on the weird weekend that year. Now, because Flying Snake has reached quite a venerable age now, we have started putting out collected editions of it in book form, and the first volume is now available. So, go to any good bookseller, or Amazon, or anywhere else you want, and you'll be able to order it. It's a fantastic volume, and it's yours for the princely price of, I can't actually remember how much it costs, but the princely price of whatever. And now over to my lovely wife, Karina, for our regular monthly visit to the Watcher of the Skies.
I've always felt a curious affinity with this species of bird, probably because for 30 years I was a secretary, and this is a secretary bird. A highly specialised ground-dwelling bird of prey from an older family than the other Old World raptors. It is native to sub-Saharan Africa and is sadly non-migratory, so will never be a natural visitor to these shores. But I think you'd be surprised quite how many completely unexpected avian visitors Britain does have, and that's what this segment of On the Track is all about. Bernard Heuvelmans himself said that cryptozoology wasn't the study of monsters, but the study of unexpected animals, and in the UK what could be more unexpected than vultures, spoonbills and albatrosses? Yes, even the kings of the Southern Ocean have been seen in British waters. 2 species of albatross have been recorded in the UK in recent years. Not all of our feathered visitors are quite so spectacular, but nearly every day there is something exciting to greet the Watcher of the Skies.
Hello, and sorry, but we have no cue card girl today, so I'm making use of this wooden book rest. Recipe book rest. So, although not seen, a birder heard the song of an Iberian chiffchaff in forestry near Penmachno, North Wales, which was later confirmed by sightings and photographs. It is a first for North Wales. With only subtle plumage differences from the millions of common chiffchaffs currently singing across Britain, it was only recognised as a separate species less than 100 years ago. Although numbers reaching Britain have increased markedly since the turn of the century, this is only the fourth recorded in Wales. Remarkably, a pair raised 7 young in South Wales in Gower in 2005. According to local wildlife group Arran Birding, a rare species of bird has been spotted on Arran for the first time on the island's history. Sightings of the water pipit were first reported in late February. The bird was trapped, ringed, photographed and released in Macquarie Bay. The sighting was then reported to the Clyde Bird Rarities Panel. After this, the water pipit has been seen feeding on the tide line just south of the slipway, with occasional forays across the road and up the hill to a favoured wet area. Arran Birding said on their website, this winter has been exceptional for recording water pipits in Scotland, with at least 30 records to date. Normally there are about 1 to 3 records. Ayrshire alone has had 8 records this winter. Most of the birds are long stayers, so let's hope the Macquarie bird, a first for Arran, is no exception, so that people can watch and enjoy this rare visitor. A rare great spotted cuckoo was found on the Isle of Wight. It was reportedly the only one in the country at the time, and only the second ever sighting on the Isle of Wight. Now, this bird is a summer visitor to the Mediterranean basin, where it breeds commonly in Iberia and less numerously across France, Italy, the Balkans and Turkey east to Asia Minor. It arrives early, sometimes even in January, departing south to its wintering grounds in sub-Saharan Africa in midsummer. As such, most records in Britain and Ireland occur in early spring, with March and April the peak months for arrival. Spring 2019 has so far produced 3 records, including the joint earliest ever record at Ballycroneen, County Cork, on the 15th of February. Cornwall and Norfolk are the best counties in which to see it, with 10 and 9 accepted records respectively, although the latter county's 10th was well watched at Weybourne in May 2019. As I'm sure most of you know, the emblem of the RSPB is the avocet, and record numbers have arrived at WWT Washington as it continues its recent resurgence. The bird, with its distinctive black and white plumage, was once declared extinct in the UK and returned to the Minsmere Reserve in Suffolk in 1947, after an absence of more than 100 years, and have gradually advanced north. The first pair of avocets to nest in the northeast did so in 2006 at WWT Washington Wetland Centre on Wearside, raising 1 chick. Between 2006 and 2015, avocets successfully raised a total of 54 chicks at WWT Washington. Now the centre has just recorded the highest ever record of adult birds, with 50 counted, 8 more than last year's previous record. Reserve Warden David Dinsdale said that the avocets benefited from a fox-proof offence at the lake, and also by nesting near a colony of common terns, which react aggressively to disturbance by would-be predators. It is hoped that this year Washington will host more than 20 breeding pairs, beating last year's total of 18. A small number of avocets have also bred at Druridge Bay in Northumberland, in what is the most northerly breeding colony in the country. An eastern yellow wagtail was spotted on Scilly last month. The bird was often classified as a subspecies of the western yellow wagtail. The species breeds in temperate Asia and has a foothold in North America and Alaska. Populations migrate to South Asia and Australia. Vagrant individuals occur around the winter quarters at migration time. For example, on Palau in Micronesia, migrant flocks of this species, apparently of the Bering Sea yellow wagtail, and including many adult males, are regularly seen, while further north on the Marianas, only the occasional stray individual, usually females or immatures, as it seems, are encountered. This insectivorous bird inhabits open country near water, such as wet meadows, and nests in tussocks.
Tussocks.
Cue Jonathan to start giggling.
Tussocks.
An American bittern was sighted on Lewis, Western Isles on the 10th of May. This bird is classed as an extremely rare vagrant to our shores. They are medium-sized herons with thick, compact bodies and have shorter legs and thicker necks than typical herons and a slightly hunched posture. They like shallow freshwater marshes, typically toward the margins and among reeds and other vegetation, and are rarely out in the open. They are also heard more often than seen, and their booming, clacking, gulping calls have earned them some colourful nicknames, including Stake Driver, Thunder Pumper, Water Belcher and Maya Drum. It has a Nearctic distribution, breeding in Canada and the northern and central parts of the United States, and wintering in the US Gulf Coast states, all of Florida into the Everglades, Caribbean islands and parts of Central America. And that is it for this episode. And now it's time to go over to Jonathan for his usual look at new and rediscovered species. Farewell.
A Hyatula is a genus of colobrid snakes, commonly referred to as vine snakes or whip snakes. They are considered by some scientists to be mildly venomous and are what is commonly termed as rear-fanged, meaning that their enlarged teeth or fangs intended to aid in venom delivery are located in the back of the upper jaw instead of in the front as they are in vipers or cobras. And the venom, though not well studied, is considered not to be medically significant to humans. I have to admit one thing, however: I haven't been able to ascertain whether their common English name is because they live in vines or because they look like them, with their elongate, thin bodies having a fancy similarity to one. Hyatula laudankia is a new species of vine snake which has been described from peninsular India. The new taxon is medium-sized arboreal snake, readily distinguished from all other congeners by morphological and genetic differences. The new species appears to be widely distributed in the eastern Ghats and central India, with the westernmost distribution extending into eastern Rajasthan. However, it's relatively rare, with only 3 specimens having been acquired over the past 9 years. This next discovery is particularly interesting because the type specimen was collected over 60 years ago. A new species of Indo-Papuan groundsnake from the genus Stegonotus has been described in a single adult male collected back in 1953 near Camro, a village in Mayabrak Regency, West Papua, Indonesia. The specimen has been considered a member of S. batajanensis, a well-defined species in the northern Maluku Islands over 500 kilometers to the northwest, with which it shares the key characteristic of having the 3rd, 4th and 5th supralabial scales touching the eyes, but the scalation is significantly different and enough to delineate it as a new species. It illustrates the need for additional herpetological survey work on the Bird's Head Peninsula, and its initial misidentification serves as a reminder of the continued relevance and importance of natural history collections as repositories for specimens and data that influence our knowledge today by reaching out from the past. I've said before on this show how I'm a big fan of snakeheads. But here's an extraordinary surprise. The first known species of snakehead to live underground. It's a new species and a new genus, and it's named after a character from Lord of the Rings. What's not to like? Enigmachana golem, a new species and genus, has been described from Kerala in South India. It's the first subterranean species of the family Chanidae. It has numerous derived and unique characteristics, separating it from both the Asian Chanascopoli and the African Parachani. Uniquely, however, amongst chanids, a golem has a very slender eel-like body, a large mouth, 43 to 44 anal ray fins, an unusual colour pattern, and it lacks poured lateral line scales on the body and body buoyancy. In addition, it's distinguished by its DNA barcode sequence. Morphological modifications, however, such as those usually associated with subterranean life, such as reduction of eyes and enhancement of non-visual senses, are absent in a golem. However, it shares with subterranean fishes a slight reduction of the pigmentation in comparison to Epygean chanids. A new species of pit viper, Trimerosaurus arunachalensis, has been described based on a single specimen. It differs small known congeners by a unique combination of characters, especially its overall reddish brown coloration, white dorsolateral stripe on outer posterior edges of ventrals, and sometimes the first dorsal scale row. It has an unforked attenuate hemipenis that extends to the 8th subcaudal scale and has no visible spines. DNA phylogenetic analysis indicates that the new species is distinct from congeners and nested well within the Trimerosaurus clade. The new species is presently known from a single locality, Ramda, West Kameng, Arunachal Pradesh in northwestern India. That's all we have time for in New and Rediscovered for this episode. I'm sure that I've said before how cherry-picking the animals I talk about in this segment of On the Track each month is one of the most difficult jobs that I regularly do. There is such a wide diversity of new species being discovered across our increasingly beleaguered planet that I truly am spoiled for choice. If you are interested in such things, I strongly recommend that you go and check out the Novataxal blog, which is where we find most of our information, both for this segment of On the Track and for the New and Rediscovered section in Animals and Men. I truly can't recommend it highly enough. I would like to also point out that whereas every effort has been made to contact the copyright holders of these photographs, we believe that we are justified in reproducing them in this not-for-profit video using the policy of fair use. However, if there is anybody who believes that their intellectual or legal rights have been infringed, please contact us and we will do our best to bring the matter to a mutually acceptable solution.
But first, there's this.
And in next month's episode...
Next month? You want to know about next month? You can't handle the truth of what's going to happen next month.
And then there's this.
So, ladies and gentlemen, here we are at the end of the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And I have got some really good news for next month. Charlotte will be back, so you won't have to just look at my ugly mug all the time. We've really missed her, and it'll be great to have her back again. I want to say a big thank you to everybody who's helped put this episode together. I really, really appreciate all that you do. Earlier I talked about my late father and how he found talk of financial matters to be vulgar, and I tend to agree with him. But something now which I'm sure he would consider to be vulgar, if he could even grasp the concept, is social media. And do I care about social media? Not really. But I am being bullied by my nearest and dearest into telling you that if you want to like this show, you can click this, whatever the damn thing is there, thingy button, and if you want to be notified every time we put up another show, you can ring this bell button thingy here. And if you want to, you can like us on Facebook. Here's our Facebook page. Or you can write about us on any other social media things, like Rabbit. or with the only one I actually understand, you can follow me on Twitter. It's the only social media platform I actually enjoy, and follow me, CFZ John, on Twitter. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for everything that you do. I hope you enjoyed this show, and I hope you'll continue watching. And, like I said, Charlotte's back next month. So, until then, be seeing you.